Welcome from Eli Lilly and Company headquarters here in the wonderful Circle City of Indianapolis. I am Derwin Smiley. On today's show, I will have a conversation with Mr. Shaun Hawkins, the Chief Diversity Officer. I am glad you are with me. The conversation with Mr. Shaun Hawkins starts right now. Mr. Shaun Hawkins is the Chief Diversity Officer here at Eli Lilly and Company. Mr. Hawkins, welcome back to the show.
Derwin, thanks for having me.
The last time you were on the show, we really focused on diversity and inclusion. Can you tell me what achievements you have made in your department since then?
You know, Derwin, we've had a lot of success since then. Too numerous to name all, but I think the biggest thing is the folks at Lilly right now would really describe that it feels different. That from a diversity and inclusion perspective, more people are brought to the table, more people have a seat at the table. Our representation numbers are actually showing that as well. We've increased the number of minorities that we've hired, increased the number of women that we've hired, and moved both minorities and women more into management level positions. So we have a lot to celebrate. We've been recognized by external publications like Diversity Inc. Last year in 2011, we made their top 50 list for the first time. This year we moved up 10 places to number 29 on the list. We're quite proud of that. Working Mother magazine actually named us to their Working Mother Hall of Fame. We've been recognized by the North American Female Executives Organization, and we've also been recognized by the Asia Society as well as Black Engineers as being top companies, both for Asians to work and then also for minorities, in particular blacks, in engineering.
Do you think that you are making a difference?
You know what, Derwin, I have to believe that I am, and more importantly, my team. We've elevated the discussion of diversity and inclusion at Lilly, and there's still, again, social justice aspects of this, but more importantly, there's business relevant aspects. And so for the last 2 years, we've actually elevated that discussion to our board of directors. We had our first ever board of directors discussion about diversity just a couple of years ago. We had our second one this April, right before our shareholders meeting, and in that meeting, we decided that every April before our shareholders meeting, we'll do a deep dive for our progress for diversity and inclusion with our compensation committee, and then have an overall high-level discussion with our overall board of directors. And so, the tone, the tenor, the velocity, and the pace at which we're making change is pretty impressive right now.
I want to piggyback on that because that's very important. Tell me a little bit more how important it is to have the buy-in of the board of directors.
Sure. With diversity and inclusion, if you have a small enough company, you can potentially have a groundswell from the bottom and push it up and make progress. But for most companies, like a company like ours with a 136-year rich heritage, you really have to start at the top and go down. And so when you start with the board of directors and they ask your CEO, what's your progress and what's your accountability for diversity, and they hold him accountable, and then your CEO holds his direct reports accountable, you can actually really make some really good changes. And so we are very diligent. We have diversity reviews with our executive committee, the folks that report to our CEO every quarter, and in addition to the board discussion. And our executives are bought in. We are going through a half-a-day session just to discuss how we can be better and more inclusive leaders with the executives. And so our executives, our CEO, and our board are really investing significant time here.
Talk a little bit about your team. You brought your team up. Mm-hmm. How important is it to have a wonderful team around you?
You know what, it doesn't matter what you're doing, right? It doesn't matter where you are in an organization. If you can get the most out of your team, you're gonna have abnormal success. And so I have a great team. We have divided our work to align with our big business units and our big functional areas. So everyone on our team has a subject matter of expertise, whether it's learning and development, whether it's market research and benchmarking, managing our employee resource groups, or what we do in the community. But each one of them also has responsibility for managing the diversity relationship with an executive committee member. And so by doing so, now we have more bandwidth to get a lot of the work done for our diversity plans, and it doesn't just fall on my shoulders.
Tell me how you deal with budget cuts.
Our philosophy is very similar to Tony Dungy's, and it's, we say, look, next man up. And with that, we just say you have to be creative. We still have an agenda. We still have activities that we want to get done from a diversity and inclusion perspective because we know that the company will benefit from it. We know that if we have better engaged employees, we'll get better outcomes from those employees, and it will show up in our innovation. And so from a budget standpoint, you have to know the company. You also have to know where there might be pockets of money and get creative and not be shy about asking those business owners that own other budgets and draw the connections between our diversity activities and their business. And so if we want to do some multicultural marketing targeted to African Americans, and the theme is around diabetes, like our Fearless African Americans and Connected and Empowered program, or FACE, then we go to the head of the diabetes business unit and ask for some of those marketing dollars so that we can put some of those programs on. And so as long as you can articulate the business relevance, there's generally ways to find some money.
How easy is it to go to other departments and say, give me some of your money?
So you already know that it's not necessarily terribly easy because we all have a specific amount of dollars that we've had allocated for our activities for the coming year. But if you have the right relationships and if you can draw the business connections, there's usually ways to find some money.
How important is it to have a good working relationship with other departments in Eli Lilly?
It's imperative. What you want people to look at the Global Diversity and Inclusion Office and the folks that work in our office is, we want people to look at us as a resource. We can help them lead their employees better. Through some of our training and our inclusive leadership philosophy, we can help them identify talent because we actually have our fingers on the pulse of talent throughout the company, and we can help them connect with their customers. And so if you start with that framework and then you develop a relationship, as I articulated, every one on my team has a business partner relationship with each major functional area and each business unit. And if you have those type of relationships, then we can actually benefit the business, and then they can help us advance our diversity and inclusion agenda.
What does the future hold for your department?
I think if I look to the future, you're going to see more and more discussion and focus on our marketplace activities, our clinical trial diversity. Everything starts and ends with our patients. You'll hear more about patient education. You'll see more activity with advocacy groups like the National Urban League or the National Council for La Raza, or the Hispanic Council on Aging, or NAACP. You'll see more activity there. And then you'll see more global activity. And our focus, and as we expand outside the U.S. and as we expand in Asia, you'll see a lot more activity and a lot more focus on talent. How do we develop talent in Asia and Latin America, and how do we import and export that talent? And I think that's where the next frontier will be, and that's where I and then my successor will continue to push.
We have to take a break. Stay with us.
不管我们的皮肤是什么颜色
No importa el idioma que hablemos.
Неважно, какие пути мы выбираем.
One thing we have in common is that we all want better health.
Eli Lilly Company では
We understand.
Thank you for staying with us. We will continue our conversation with the Chief Diversity Officer at Eli Lilly, Mr. Shaun Hawkins. When we went to break, I asked you the question, what does the future hold for your department?
Sure. When I think about the future of my department, or even just diversity and inclusion, as I was describing, I think you're going to see more of a global focus. The other thing you're going to see is more of a focus on inclusion. And so in the U.S., we've had some maturation as it relates to diversity and our differences, and we have not clearly closed that gap. But organizations are starting to understand part of the problem is you can bring women and minority group members and people of difference in, but the hard part is to retain them. And the hard part is also to make sure your work group has above average performance, and you get that by having an inclusive culture. And so you have a culture that respects the differences, that invites those differences, and you can bring in a different perspective now those individuals can flourish. And so you're going to see more and more focus on how do we, as leaders, adopt a more inclusive leadership style, and how do you create a culture of inclusion so that that diversity can flourish and help your bottom line and also help drive innovation. And from a global perspective, you know, you're going to look and see new market opportunities, and you can't necessarily just take the U.S.-centric view of doing business, the U.S.-centric management style, and then go to those markets and expect to succeed. And so there's going to be more of a focus on, let me understand the dynamics of those marketplaces, let me understand the needs of the employees there first, and then I will start to bring my leadership style to bear to the marketplace. And you will see more companies really focused on, again, inclusive leadership outside the U.S.
For those individuals who do not know what inclusion means, sure. What's your definition of inclusion? You know,
when I think very simply of diversity and inclusion, I think about diversity simply being what we look like. And there's other elements of diversity, right? So that's the primary elements, right? Race, gender, sexual orientation, and then you also have work style, leadership style. But inclusiveness to me is really, what does it feel like to come work in an organization? And so at Lilly, we want to change what we look like or mirror more our patient population when we start thinking about our employee base from a diversity standpoint. But we also want to change and improve what it feels like to come to work. That you can come share different thoughts, you can come challenge, that you can bring your full self to work and thrive. And that's really what I think simply about inclusion. You just have an atmosphere where people can share different perspectives and can be themselves and actually help further your work group's goal.
How is your department impacting the organization and its bottom line?
You know, I think it starts with our innovation strategy, right? So let's start with that and work our way back. So from an innovation strategy, if you want to impact innovation, you really need the creativity of a work group. You also need productivity. And I come back to the culture that you want. And so to get that creativity and productivity, you need engaged employees. And there's no better way to get engaged employees than have a culture of inclusion that allows folks to be themselves, allows folks to contribute. And to get that inclusive culture, you need to respect their differences or their diversity. And so when we start with the patient, when we end with the patient, it starts with our clinical trials. What is the representation within our clinical trials? And then when we end with the patient, is how do you communicate to those patients? And so when we look at culturally and linguistically ways to communicate to patients, whether it's targeted marketing to African Americans, specifically about diabetes or depression, or a recent pilot that we ran focused on the Latino market and translating our material to Spanish. And we saw a 6-to-1 return on the investment we made in the marketing and the sales results. You know you can impact the bottom line. You know, and that was simply just taking what we do for mainstream and translating it into Spanish. And we know the next frontier here is deriving cultural insights from the Latino marketplace, doing very specific market research and then very specific marketing to Latinos, not just taking what's mainstream and translating it to Spanish.
I know you've been very busy flying around the country. Talk to me a little bit about your speaking engagements.
You know, I've had the pleasure of working very closely with both our marketing organization, our corporate affairs organization, and then also we have the good fortune of having our employee resource groups have conferences. We just had our global women's conference here last week. We had our African American forum here back in August, and so I spoke clearly at both of those events. But I've afforded the opportunity to speak with the National Urban League, the Women of Power Breakfast. Recently with the National Black MBA, we had a personalized medicine panel, and so I was on a panel with business leaders, presidents of the internal medicine organization, presidents of the oncology organization of other companies, and you have a diversity guy talking business, the value of diversity in clinical trials, but what does it mean in the marketplace as we try to personalize and tailor the medicine to patients. And so the good thing about having business people in diversity, you can actually have very relevant business discussions and keep diversity at the forefront.
Since you have become the Chief Diversity Officer, what has changed in your field?
You know, I think the shift to inclusion. Over the last couple of years, you've really seen the field focus more and more on culture and culture change and providing and focusing on the similarities and trying to, as leaders, help people connect with the organization. And I think that's kind of been one of the biggest shifts. And then the other thing comes back to global. We're all US-based companies or European-based companies are really trying to figure out what does diversity and inclusion mean globally. Because it's not the same in Istanbul as it is in Lima, Peru, as it is in Shanghai, as it is in Johannesburg, as diversity is defined here in the US. But it doesn't matter where you are in the world. There's going to be folks that are considered insiders and folks that are considered outsiders. And so as business leaders, whether you're in diversity and inclusion or not, if you're just a frontline supervisor, it is incumbent upon you to create an environment where all of those people are included. Because at the end of the day, you want to get the best business results possible, and you need an environment that allows those people to flourish and thrive.
I think recently I read, doing research, read an article where there was a debate in the field of diversity about diversity training.
Right.
And if it has merit or if the companies, if it's vital to the organization. What do you think?
You know, I think all training, you know, if you have a learning culture, depending on the offering, then there's clearly going to be merit. On its face, I think diversity and inclusion training is important, but it's how you teach it. If it's simply starting and ending with race and gender, then you say, well, you know, that may or may not have its place. But if you say we're teaching a capability, or if you're saying as you enter a company, we're teaching you about the culture of this company, and every one person is included. Every new person can add value to the company, and we want you to understand the framing and the value that we see on all of our employees as individuals. I think that absolutely has a place. If you're a supervisor or if you run a sales team, you know, when we talk about leadership development and you talk about leadership training, you're saying, how do I develop you so that we can win? And from a diversity and inclusion standpoint, we know that the educational marketplace is becoming more diverse. Women get more four-year degrees than men right now. Minority group members are increasingly getting four-year degrees and graduate degrees at a high rate. Those people are going to enter the workplace. So it's incumbent upon a leader to say, look, I want to win. If these folks are going to enter my workplace and be on my team, give me some tools, some secret sauce, if you will, to help me lead those people and help me create a more cohesive team so that I can deliver my business results. So why wouldn't you want to do it? This is just about capabilities. That's in my view.
He's Mr. Shaun Hawkins, the Chief Diversity Officer here at Eli Lilly. Stay with us.
不管我们的皮肤是什么颜色，
No importa el idioma que hablemos.
Неважно, какие пути мы выбираем.
One thing we have in common is that we all want better health.
Eli Lilly Company では
We understand.
Visit the Derwin Smiley Show online for weekly blogs, previous shows, the television schedule, sponsorship information, or to post a comment or show idea. We want to hear from you and find out how we can inspire the greatness in you. Log on to www.thederwinsmileyshow.com today.
When we went to break, we was talking about if diversity training was an asset to the organization. What's your feeling? Give me a little bit more about that.
The key is the approach and what you're trying to teach. And the best companies and the best learning and development organizations really teach diversity and inclusion as a capability. It's something that people who lead people should seek after because, again, it will help them develop and engage and motivate a workforce that will be diverse. I mean, regardless of whether or not you have ethnic diversity or any visible signs of diversity, you're going to have diverse perspectives on your team. And so the best companies and the best organizations that do diversity and inclusion really find ways to engage and get the most out of each individual on that team. And it needs to kind of permeate the organization. And so diversity and inclusion can't just be extra credit, right? It can't be the last 30 minutes of some leadership training. And diversity in total can't simply be some sort of side project that you do only in the community or when you want awards. It really needs to be integrated within your business. And so the good thing here at Lilly, diversity and inclusion is integrated from our marketplace work with our patient education, our clinical trial diversity, multicultural marketing. It's integrated within our workplace work, our recruiting and staffing, development, mentoring, flexible work arrangements, and then it's also integrated with supplier diversity. And Lilly's been recognized by the Small Business Administration as an outstanding company for our supplier diversity programs. And this is a long, rich history that spanned a number of years. And so we really have a very good cohesive strategy that starts with marketplace, goes to workplace, and then also concludes with our supplier base.
I wanted to piggyback on something when you said the inclusion here at Eli Lilly is wonderful. Mm-hmm. And we want different races of people to come and bring their ideas to their supervisors. Tell me, how does that happen? If I have a staffer, a worker here at Eli Lilly has a wonderful idea, what's the process of getting that into the upper management? So
the best way is, if you lead a work group, is that you have set the environment and the framework and the foundation that allows your employees to come with creative ideas. And then as a leader, that you, along with your employee that has the creative idea, advance that through the right chains. So if you have an idea of how to save costs in manufacturing, no matter how wild that idea is, if you're a leader that has created a work environment where people can share different thoughts, that they're not afraid to speak, then they'll bring that idea up to you and you can advance and then help improve our bottom line. Years ago, we actually had a drug for cancer that we thought about shelving. And we had a scientist that actually had a creative idea of adding a folic acid linker to this cancer therapy to make it more tolerable. Now, this hadn't been done. And if he didn't have a work environment and a supervisor that says, look, bring me those creative ideas, that's how we get to true innovation, that drug would have never made it to market. That drug right now sells over $2 billion, and it has saved countless lives or extended lives for patients, right? So now we've had patients that have seen one extra birthday, or has seen their child graduate from college or high school, or has been able to attend a wedding simply because someone had that bright idea to modify the drug in a way to make it a little bit more tolerable.
The way you speak about Eli Lilly, you make me want to come and work for
Derwin,
Eli.
Come on. The problem is I'd have to work for you.
I want to talk about a quote that you had. I forget what. I think it was in Diversity Inc. Mm-hmm. where the quote was that you said, diversity and inclusion is explicitly linked to innovation. How so?
Right. So this is the way we look at diversity and inclusion and innovation. So Lilly is an innovation-based company. There's other companies in the pharmaceutical industry, that may have more of a consolidation strategy, meaning they're going to acquire a bunch of other big companies and pull them together. Some companies have a diversification strategy, meaning they're going to carve out different business units and they think that that's the way to succeed. Ours is a strategy that says we benefit the patients the most by coming up with the best therapeutics to address unmet medical need. And so to do that, you need an environment that fosters creativity. And so when I think about diversity and inclusion, right, you respect the differences, the diversity. You have an environment of inclusion that allows that to kind of grow, and it incubates right into employee engagement. That employee engagement is really the driver for creativity and for productivity. That creativity goes to innovation, that productivity hits the bottom line. So the more engaged our employees are, the more included they feel, the more hours that they will work, the more of their brain and their hearts and minds that we get as they start thinking about new therapies or more cost-effective ways to manufacture drugs or better ways to communicate about our drugs to patients and to doctors. And so when you have that environment, you deliver on your innovation, you have new products. I just described that cancer drug that would have never made it to market. If we didn't have an environment where that creativity could have flourished, that drug wouldn't have made it to market, and $2 billion in annual sales would have never been realized because of that. So that's how you get to your innovation that benefits the patients, but it also hits the bottom line.
Tell me about when you wake up in the morning, how do you feel about coming to work?
You know, Derwin, I'm energized, you know, because there's a nobility to work in healthcare. You know, whether you're a physician, whether you're a researcher or a scientist, or whether you work in pharma and the human resources organization like I do, those of us that work in this industry know that regardless of whatever role we play and whatever position we play, that our products benefit. They extend lives, they save lives, they allow us to have better quality lives. And so when you think about your grandmother and the insulin that she might be on, or you think about a friend that has gone through some trying times and ended up on a depression medicine, or you think about the folks that are suffering from Alzheimer's, and you think about the products that you make that come out of your labs can address some of those ailments, it's easy to get motivated to come to work.
So what does the future hold for Eli Lilly?
You know, Derwin, I think we're solid. We have a good game plan as it relates to making it through some challenging times. I think most people here in the Indianapolis area know that Lilly has suffered the patent loss of our largest drug last year. We have a couple other patent expiries that are coming, but we also have good news. We also know that we have the products in our pipeline to continue to deliver the growth that our investors expect. But more importantly, we have the products in our pipeline that we can deliver to patients to continue to meet those patient needs. So Lilly's going to be around for a long time. Our senior leadership are committed. They have looked at the marketplace. They've looked at the regulatory environment, political environment, and we're all pretty confident that, you know, Lilly will be around for another 100+ years.
What does the future hold for Mr. Shaun Hawkins?
You know what, I'll be continuing to work in diversity and inclusion and still pushing the ball forward, trying to really make a difference and change what it feels like to come here. If we work on our processes and if we work on the culture, I know our diversity metrics will come. We've already seen the fruits of some of that labor. So I'll still be here. So this time next year, hopefully you and I'll be talking about some more of our good results and successes.
Mr. Hawkins, I want to thank you once again for coming on the Derwin Smiley Show and sharing the insight of this wonderful organization of Eli Lilly and Company, and you're always welcome to come back.
Derwin, it's my pleasure. I appreciate you having me.
Once again, he is Mr. Shaun Hawkins, the Chief Diversity Officer of Eli Lilly and Company here in the wonderful Circle City of Indianapolis. And remember, my sole purpose is to inspire the greatness in you. I'll see you next time.